Mic check, mic check, mic check. Check 1 2, check 1 2. Mic check, mic check. Well, good afternoon and welcome to Live Impact News right here on 13 News Now, the app. Now, we join you here at 1 o'clock p.m. on May 19th. It is a Tuesday afternoon, and we have an immense amount of things to cover on Live Impact News today. Now, it is just myself today. The People's producer, Nia Campbell, is not here today because she is doing a number of other things that she needs to do at this station. For this station, you actually will be able to catch her show at 5 o'clock p.m. on 13 News Now today. So it is just I, which means, guys, there's no one here to tell us what to do. But it also means there's no one here to tell us what to do. So we are going to exercise a bit of patience and a lot of focus, and we are going to get through this stream together. And you know what? There is so much to cover and so much to allocate our attention to that I don't know that we'll have to do much. Honestly, the person who has been doing more than just about anyone else this week to give us all the coverage we need of the biggest story, not just here in Hampton Roads, but one of the biggest stories here nationally, is Madison Schlegel. Madison Schlegel joins us live from Newport News now. She has been covering the Richneck Elementary shooting case all week long and all day long, and what a day it has been so far there in Newport News. So we're going to bring Madison on now to give us an update on everything she's seen today. Madison, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. I can't imagine how busy you've been. Can you just give us a synopsis of what we've seen today in this trial?
Yeah, Connor, today, like you've mentioned, has been absolutely jam-packed. Yesterday, we saw all of jury selection happen. We saw the jury sworn in. Today, we heard motions from the defense before court started, along with opening statements, and they have started testimony from witnesses. Now, the first witness that we did see on the stand today was former Richneck Elementary School teacher Abby Zwerner. She was the one that was shot through her hand and her chest that day on January 6th during the shooting. Now, on top of that, we did hear from Zwerner about the days and how the events unfolded. She talked about the moments that she remembered seeing the student out of the corner of her eye with his hands in his pockets, and then he pulled out the gun and shot her. She also recounted the moments of the students in the room who also heard it. She said that after those gunshots went off, that she immediately saw her students screaming and running out of the classroom. They ran across the room to the next classroom in order to tell another teacher what had happened. At that point, Abby Zwerner was just trying to help herself, trying to get herself to the office, to trying to warn other school administrators about what was happening. Now, on the stand today, what we heard and questioning from both prosecution and defense, and what defense's argument was, is that Abby Zwerner didn't personally sequester the student when she maybe thought that there was an issue. So we heard reports that Zwerner and the reading specialist, Amy Kovac, were notified by students about the potential for there being a gun in the student's backpack. Now, the defense was, in their line of questioning, was arguing that when Abby maybe did get that bit of information, if she was able to sequester that student herself. She said that she did technically have the authority to do it, but in that moment, she didn't. And again, this kind of questioning has been coming out along in questioning with Abby here. We did have to stop a couple of times to make sure that we were laying the grounds for hearsay and what hearsay really means in this case. So in the testimony here, what the prosecution and the defense are trying to avoid is any statements along the lines of this person told me this person said this, I said this to this person. This is only an account of firsthand things that are going down the line here. So only statements that are things that Zwerner personally observed, actions that Zwerner personally did or didn't take in this situation. Now, again, Abby Zwerner, we knew that was going to be one of the biggest witnesses, and again, the star witness of this case, seeing that she was one of the victims and was the victim in this case. But on top of that, we also spoke with her attorney after court. She was left for the day. She was able to leave for the day, given that permission by the judge. And we were able to speak with her attorney after they left. Her attorney, Diane Toscano, tells us that right now, you heard that plea in Abby Zwerner's statements about how the Newport News City has failed to support Zwerner through these last couple months and these last couple of years as she's been dealing with the fallout of this case. But that was just in the case of Abby Zwerner testifying. I know I'm throwing a lot at you now, Connor, and the whole joy of us having Live Impact News here is that we can kind of sit and talk details about everything that's happening. So I want to hit on now the next person that they brought up for testimony here. That was reading specialist Amy Kovac. She was the second witness here to take the stand. Now, we mentioned that there were conversations about hearsay and about how the judge and the prosecution and the defense were trying to solidify what kind of grounds in which hearsay can be ruled in. So there have been so many questions about that. At one point, the judge did have to dismiss the jury and dismiss Kovac on the stand so that the prosecution and the defense, along with the judge, could have a conversation about how they actually could move forward in questioning. There were a couple instances, not just with Amy Kovac, but also with Abby Zwerner, where there were questions that were asked, it was stopped, they were either overruled or sustained, and the question maybe had to be asked again in a couple of different ways in order to get a proper answer for the jury. Now, again, Amy Kovac did take the stand, and she had mentioned that she was the one to formally report the issue about the child having a handgun at the school. She went to Ebony Parker with those concerns. She also had told Abby Zwerner and had witnessed herself that the 6-year-old JT, which they're referring to the child as, was acting suspicious that day. They said that he was out of character for him typically, and even though the school had a recorded record of incidences of this student in the past, they said that the way that he was acting this day was out of line even for those instances that had already been recorded within the school. Now, in the line of questioning here, just like how we heard from the defense in terms of Abby Zwerner, in terms of Amy Kovac, the defense was also asking if she herself had the authority to remove the 6-year-old child from the classroom or remove the other children from the other student at that time, and if they thought that that was appropriate. Now, Kovac answered that in retrospect, that's something that she maybe could have done, but what she did do was what was outlined in the crisis management plan by the school division, which was reporting that directly up the line, which she did multiple times, which was outlined in testimony. She reported those instances to Ebony Parker, Dr. Ebony Parker. Now, as we were coming out just to do this hit for you guys, I was just leaving the courtroom. We also had a deputy that was sworn in, Deputy Blythe. He had talked a little bit, 2-3 questions from the defense, from the prosecution, no questions from the defense there. And as I was coming out of the courtroom, we had the former principal of the school also taking the stand here in this case. Don't mind me as I've got my notes here. We've got pages and pages of information. But Brianna Foster had just taken the stand as we were coming out here to speak with you this afternoon. Again, she's the former principal of Richneck Elementary School. As we were leaving, the prosecution was asking Brianna Foster to take a look at the crisis management plan by the division and was asking her to validify if it was a proper representation of what should happen in the state of an emergency. Again, what's happening post then, we're going to keep you updated. Again, we've had that live stream running all day on that 30-minute delay about what's happening inside the courtroom. But Connor, we're just looking to bring it to you as it's happening.
Well, you guys certainly are, Madison. At some point in there, you snuck in an apology for giving us so much information. Never apologize for that. We greatly appreciate it. This is an immense amount of detail of everything that happened this morning. I won't keep you too long here. I'm wondering, in terms of Abby Zwerner on the stand, how was her presence? How was her emotion to live through that day again through questioning? I really cannot imagine. Can you give us a sense of what it was like for her having to go through that again, once again in a courtroom?
Yeah, absolutely, Connor. Again, emotions were high, and I think if you were watching the stream and you were watching Abby be testified, at one point the prosecution had to stop Abby because, again, like I had mentioned, there were so many different objections when it came to hearsay that at one point Abby was kind of editing herself as she was speaking instead of just giving answers as they should. So the prosecution actually had to stop questioning and had to ask Abby, are you thinking about whether or not this is going to be hearsay or not? She said, yeah, kind of. I'm in my head a little bit right now about the situation. She wanted to answer questions properly for the jurors and also all the attorneys present in front of the judge. But clearly she was shaken up. She was answering questions about her direct actions that day, saying that also being questioned if she had the authority to move the student. While she was answering these questions, and Connor, mainly what I think you're interested about here is her disposition when she was talking about those moments, recounting what happened that day in the classroom. It was truly striking to see her pause because in her speaking while she was talking and giving that testimony, not only in her words was she painting a picture of what was happening, but you could see her on her face reliving those moments right there back in the classroom. She recounted to us that there were 19 other students in that classroom at that moment and the chaos that kind of ensued from it. So again, emotions were high. She was taking it as it came, but she was also, again, I believe, trying to make sure that she was answering questions for the prosecution and the defense in a way that they wouldn't have to object about what she was saying. So again, the attorneys did step in. They did tell her, Abby, what we want to hear from you today are just your true, full, and honest answers about what you experienced that day. Any hearsay or objections from attorneys in this case, the court will handle. So again, I think that right now she just wants to be sure that she's giving all of the information that she can in a way that she's able, while also dealing with the fact that this is something that she struggled with personally and is going to be dealing with for the rest of her life.
And Madison, when it comes to both the conversation that had to happen off to the side and sort of the confusion around whether or not something was hearsay throughout sort of the morning portion of this trial, is it either side, the defense or the prosecution, that is more so creating this dynamic? Is one side or the other responsible for the repeated calls of hearsay, or is this something that has just been an issue in the courtroom overall?
Connor, from what I'm seeing, mainly it's an issue on the defense's side. The prosecution will ask a question and then the defense will object. Again, hearsay has been thrown out a handful of times already. What they want to make sure is that the people who are on the stand and are giving testimony aren't necessarily just narrating what happened that day, but more giving a clear insight into the direct actions that they took that day. So again, when Amy Kovac or Abby Zwerner were on the stand trying to recount those moments, you do get little bleedings of, well, I told this person this, or I was reported, this was reported by this person. That's where the defense was starting to see a little bit more of those sticky lines and wanted to lay a little bit more of those foundational grounds in place so that this back and forth maybe wouldn't be as much. But as we're seeing, not just through Abby Zwerner's testimony, but in Amy Kovac's as well, there have been a lot of those discrepancies, but I have a feeling we're going to see this play out through the case. I mean, we do know that right now the job of the prosecution right now is to prove Ebony Parker's actions were so wanton, gross, and negligible in regards to human life and a child's life that there can be beyond no reason of a doubt in her actions here. So what they're trying to prove, and what the defense and also the prosecution are trying to prove, is that the actions that were taken are not hearsay, were not he said, she said, but more asking, what did you do that day? When you were told this, what did you do? So again, it's all in logistics for the court, and that's why we leave those matters of objections, etc., to the people who are running the courtrooms right now, and that's why we've got the judge. She's been noting the objections that have either been sustained or objected, and I assume that for the rest of the witnesses that we are going to see in this case, we're going to see that continue to play out.
Okay, Madison, we greatly appreciate the update, and thanks for spending a little extra time with us answering our questions. And I know you've got a courtroom to get back to, so thanks for joining us, and we'll see you at 4 o'clock on 13 News Now.
Of course, Connor, thanks so much. And it looks like we just saw our field producer, Sarah Calloway, pop out, so that must mean that we're on break. They were expecting to pause for lunch around 1 o'clock, so that would be around right now.
Okay, so recess has begun in the Richneck criminal trial that continues today. Madison Schlegel, we appreciate you very much. You certainly deserve a recess as well, and we'll see you later on.
Thank you.
All right, so that's Madison Schlegel once again talking to us from Newport News. And you heard her say how our field producer, Sarah Calloway, had just walked out of the courtroom, meaning that things had gone to recess. Now, for our live feed, for all live feeds of this trial, wherever it is being broadcast, there is a 30-minute delay. That 30-minute delay creates a buffer, as there are a number of intricacies that go into covering a trial like this and different things that you want to be careful about. So we still have what is essentially our live feed of this trial up and ready to go. So we are going to listen in to the courtroom still. Even though they are in recess, we are still on a 30-minute delay. So we're going to listen in for some time here in Newport News still. And when that court goes to recess, you'll see what we just heard from Madison Schlegel. So let's go live out to Newport News right now and take a listen in.
Brianna Foster. Ms. Foster, please. Good afternoon. Please stand in front of the court to be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay, and you may adjust my phone to mute. Any questions the attorneys may have.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Would you please tell us your name?
Brianna Foster.
And Ms. Foster, back in January of 2023, how were you employed? Okay, I'm going to ask you to speak up a little bit. It can be kind of hard to hear. Did you say that you were could you repeat what you said?
And I was employed with Newport Public Schools as the principal.
Okay, and what school were you a principal at?
Richneck Elementary.
Okay. Ms. Foster, if you know, had your school at Richneck Elementary adopted a crisis and emergency management plan?
Yes.
And if I were to show you the plan, would you recognize it?
Yes.
Okay, Judge, may I approach?
You may.
Yes, yes. May I approach?
You may.
Just take a look at that document there, and I'll ask you some questions about it. You don't have to say anything about it at this point.
Kind of getting ahead of this, if they're going to try to anything, how does that
right, I'll be ready to hear the objection.
Ms. Foster, just let me know when you've had enough time to look at that document. My question is going to be, is that a fair and accurate copy of the Richneck Crisis Management Plan as you remember it?
I cannot answer that in full, but I remember that it's a fair and accurate representation.
Understood. I'll take it back. At the time that you were working on January 6th of 2023, were you aware of the crisis management plan?
Yes, I do recall that we have.
Okay. And what was the purpose of having a crisis management plan at all?
We're just required to, every school is required to have one.
Okay. Was it your intention that you would follow the crisis management plan in a crisis?
Yes.
Okay. I want to take your attention then to January 6th of 2023. On that day, was there a crisis incident that occurred at the school?
Yes.
Okay. And what was that in brief?
Later that afternoon, I found out that there was a student, it was reported that a student had a weapon.
Okay. At any point, was there a critical incident that required police to show up?
Would you mind clarifying what you mean, how?
Did something huge happen on January 6th of 2023? That's the whole reason we're here?
Yes.
Okay. And what was that?
That a student shot his teacher.
Yes. So I want to ask you, prior to that moment, the moment of the shooting,
Yes.
had anyone...
Your Honor, I'm sorry. I'm going to object to her response to the question that she actually observed the incident. I don't think that she was present when that occurred, so she can testify to what she observed, but she has made a conclusion that I don't think she can really testify to.
Response.
Judge, it's the incident for which we are here. She's the principal of the school. She knows what happened at the school that day. I'm just trying to orient her in time so that I can ask a question.
So I'll overrule it as received in that posture as to why are you here in court today, the incident that brings you in court today. Not that she observed it or anything
Yes.
further than that without further questions and testimony.
Thank you,
So what's your next question?
Prior to that event occurring at your school, did anyone tell you that JT or anyone that there was a weapon on campus?
Yeah.
Any hint from anyone that there was a weapon on your campus prior to that?
Yeah.
Roughly how many students attended Richneck at that time? And I don't mean on that day, but just the total number of students that would have been in the school. And you can give us an estimate.
I truly not recall, but if I had to give you a number, maybe 500.
Okay. I want to talk to you about a student named JT. Are you familiar with who I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. We're not using any student names at all, so any students that you mentioned, please don't use their name. Had you personally, prior to the incident on January 6th, so earlier that year, had you personally had any issues with JT's behavior that you saw?
Yes.
Okay, what's the judge? I didn't hear you, Mr.
Well, Your Honor.
Rowe. Okay, response?
If she handled a discipline issue with JT that the defendant knows about, then it's relevant, as all of those are.
We've allowed those in previously, so I'll allow this in to be consistent. So you may proceed. You can answer the question. Do you need him to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
So the question was, in the time before, the days before the shooting, had you personally been aware or observed behavior of JT that was a discipline issue?
Yes.
And could you just describe that?
To my memory, earlier that week, there was a situation that took place between him and his first grade teacher involving her cell phone.
Okay, and did that situation come to you?
Yes.
And who appeared to you to
I
inform you?
actually think it was two people that came to me. I don't remember if it was his teacher.
Okay.
I'm sitting here trying to think back exactly how I knew about it, but I remember calling his mother that evening.
Okay. So as a result of that incident, you did contact his mother?
Yes.
Okay. Any other specific instances, discipline-wise, of JT that year that you remember? If you don't remember, that's fine to say that.
Not in detail, but there were other incidences that took place.
Okay. If you know, did the school attempt to do anything to try to moderate that behavior?
Yes.
And what was it that the school did to attempt to control the behavior?
I don't remember the name of the process that was in place. However, they met, it was a scheduled number of, like, let's say, weeks or throughout the month where they would meet with the teacher, assistant principal, parent, and Ms. Kovac to go over like his progress, academics, behaviors, and plan, essentially progress monitoring how he was doing it in school.
Okay. And I just have one last question for you. Is it true that you were working at the school hand in hand with Dr. Ebony Parker?
Yes.
Okay. And is Dr. Parker in the courtroom right now?
Yes.
Okay. Could you please just describe what she's wearing and identify her for the judge, or point her out?
Yes. She has brown and black hair. If I'm not mistaken, she has a navy blue.
And does may the court recognize she's identified the defendant?
So noted.
Thank you. I have no further questions for you. Please answer any questions of the defense counsel.
Thank you.
Can I take a moment?
Yes.
Good afternoon. How are you? Just a few questions. There was a crisis management plan in place. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I'm sorry. So there was a crisis management plan in place. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay. And if there were any type of crisis at the school, had you instructed any of the teachers or staff not to come to you with that crisis?
No.
Okay. Was it the policy of your school for staff members to bring problems to Dr. Parker, and if whatever she said goes? Or were you ultimately responsible for the safety of the students at your school?
To my knowledge, it says joint. In my previous positions, it's hard to say. Like, ultimately, I am as a principal, yes.
Okay. So would you expect your staff members, if they weren't satisfied with whatever was brought to the assistant principal, that they should bring whatever that crisis or problem to you?
Yes.
Okay. Did that occur on January 6th of 2023?
No.
Could any teacher who had a disruptive student in their class, could they have brought that student to the administrative office?
Yes.
Okay. Would you expect them to bring that student to the administrative office?
Yes.
If any teacher or staff member had the belief that there was a firearm possessed by a student, would you agree that that student should be separated from the rest of his classmates?
Yes.
Okay. Would you also agree that law enforcement should be immediately notified?
Yes.
Before the shooting, as far as you know, did any of those steps take place?
To my knowledge, no.
All right. Can I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Briefly, Judge. So on January 6th, during that day, what were you doing and where were you in the school?
Do you want a timeline of the whole day?
As much as you remember, it's fair enough. If you don't remember, you can say you don't remember, but just as much as you remember, where were you and what were you doing that day?
That day we had some interviews in the morning. I subbed for a game teacher break so she could handle lunch for herself, a personal lunchtime.
Now, when you were doing the interviews, where would you have been in the school?
The main office in my office.
In your office, okay. And then the second thing you said you did was what again?
Relieving teachers so she could have a lunch break.
So that would have been in a classroom?
Yes.
Okay. Then what?
Then I remember we had a family and military life meeting with the new partnership that we were forming
Okay. Where did that occur?
in our conference room.
Okay.
And then after that, during that meeting, I remember emailing our lead custodian to ask if I think I walked in or emailed our lead custodian, maybe Dr. Parker, asking about space, because they wanted to know about space, and I couldn't remember off the top of my head where we could put them. And then after that meeting was over, Dr. Parker and our lead custodian came to my office, in addition to 2 students who were waiting to speak with me came to my office.
Okay. And while you're in your office, what's the first signal you get that something is wrong?
I think the words I heard were, he has a gun, or she's been shot.
Okay.
And then
What did you do?
from there, I slammed my door, and I took the 2 students who were in my office and everyone else, and I shoved them into the bathroom and tried to barricade them in. I called my direct supervisor and 911, and they're telling everyone in the bathroom that I'm going out. And I remember someone saying, "You can't." I have to. And then when I went out, Dr. Zwerner, Miss Zwerner, was on the ground, and there were staff. And I remember saying, like, "Please put this school on lockdown." And Miss O looked up. I looked up, and Miss O said, she had already put the school on lockdown.
All right. Thank you. I don't have anything further for you.
Your Honor, I don't have any follow-up.
Thank you. And the status of this witness?
I would ask that she be constructively sequestered and subject to recall.
No objection to that, Your Honor.
Okay. So, Ms. Foster, what that means is, they're done with your testimony for now. They may recall you to come back to the witness stand, but you don't have to physically stay in the building.
Okay.
So you may leave the building and just make sure that the contact information is good. So if they need to recall you as a witness, they can. You cannot stay in the courtroom,
Okay.
and you cannot discuss the case until it's over.
And does that mean
Okay, so Brianna Foster Newton, a former principal at Richneck Elementary School, finishing up with her time on the stand in Newport News as that courtroom looks to move on to other parts of this trial, other witnesses coming to the stand. Now, as you can see, we've got our triple box going for you right now because at the top is the setup for a White House press briefing. It's a White House press briefing that is beginning actually as we speak. Vice President J.D. Vance has just walked to the podium, and so J.D. Vance will be conducting this particular press briefing while the trial is ongoing in Newport News. For us here, we're trying to keep you up to date on everything. Our priority is making sure we cover every aspect of this trial that we can, while acknowledging there are other live events on that during breaks in the trial we will make sure that we visit with. For the time being, however, we are actually going to do a very quick commercial break, and as you can see, we've got plenty to cover when we return here on Live Impact News. All right, and we're back here on Live Impact News. 1:39 p.m. here as we continue to move through our first hour of the show today. We've heard from Madison Schlegel with a number of updates from the courtroom. We've also spent time in that courtroom in Newport News itself in the midst of this Richneck Elementary trial, and that trial has now gone to recess. We heard from Madison Schlegel that this would be happening. There would be a lunch recess. That has now occurred. Our live feed no longer active. We know that they'll be back at some point in time. We'll likely head back out live to that courtroom when that occurs. Now, we also have our field producer, Sarah Calloway, who is in Newport News with Madison. She will likely be joining us via phone at some point in the stream with even more updates. As you can see on your screen, we still have J.D. Vance giving that White House press briefing. And then on the bottom of your screen, we actually have an NTSB investigation hearing into the UPS plane crash that occurred in Louisville. Obviously, that it was something we covered at the time here on Live Impact News. You may remember from some of the shocking imagery that we saw from that particular crash. It was kind of a fiery explosion that occurred during that crash. Again, it was involving UPS, and now we have a hearing from the NTSB in which they're investigating that situation. So we are monitoring all of that. It was November 2025. I was trying to make sure I had the date right. November 2025, Louisville UPS plane crash. NTSB with their hearing, their investigative hearing happening right now. But we are actually going to go out to the White House and listen in on what J.D. Vance has to say during this White House press briefing. So that is where we are going to go right now. Let's take a listen in Washington, D.C.
That allows the Iranians to have a nuclear weapon. So as the president just told me, we're locked and loaded. We don't want to go down that pathway, but the president is willing and able to go down that pathway if we have to. So with that, I will say thank you all. It's cool to be here. I'm going to give a shout out, of course, to the person I am replacing today, Carolyn Levitt, who hopefully is at home enjoying some time with her beautiful kids. I told Carolyn I would stand in for her today for the White House press briefing on the condition that when Usha has our baby in July, that she would be vice president for a couple weeks. So thank you, guys. And I actually want to start first with Nick from Breitbart. Nick, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you. Today we saw the president endorse Ken Paxton over John Cornyn in the Texas Senate race. Do you think that sends a message going forward for the next cycle to senators, considering running for re-election, or any MAGA-aligned potential candidates that are considering challenging them?
Well, I'd say a couple things, Nick. First of all, I think the president's very gratified by the response that he's heard from the base and from a lot of voters, I think, who are passionate about Ken Paxton. We think Ken Paxton is going to be a great senator for the people of Texas, but most importantly, a great United States senator who can work on solving the problems that all of us confront as a country together. I've known John Cornyn for a long time, but unfortunately, when it really counted, Ken Paxton was there for the country, was there for the president, and that's why he ultimately earned the president's endorsement. He thinks he's going to be a better senator, thinks he's going to make a better candidate, and so I do think it sends a message, but really not just the endorsement, but one of the things the president has done very effectively, going back 10 years in his leadership of the Republican Party and the country as president of the United States, is he said, I want people who fight for the good. I want people who can't be bought by corporate lobbyists, who can't be bought by Wall Street, who can't be bought by special interests, who are going to go to Washington and fight for the people who actually elected them to those positions. And I think one of the things we've seen in the Republican Party, while I can't say that all of our representatives are perfect or all of our senators are perfect, we have seen a much better crop of talent come into Washington since Donald Trump has been the leader of the party and the leader of the movement. I do think we're going to continue to see that happening. But I think the message that people should take from this is fundamentally, you have got to serve the people who sent you. And if you don't do that, you're going to find yourself out of step with voters or out of step with the President of the United States, and that's not a good place to be politically.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just following up on what you just said, you said that the White House is negotiating with Iran in good faith. I think Americans tend to believe that, but what is it about the Iranian side that you personally have seen where you believe that they are negotiating with us in good faith?
Well, first of all, I'd say it's a very complicated country, and it's a country that I wouldn't pretend that I understand even after as deep as I've been involved in this process from the very beginning. It's a great and proud civilization, amazing people. We obviously have a great Iranian American community here in the United States of America, smart people, very hardworking, and you see some of that in the negotiating team on the other side. You also see some very hardline positions in the negotiating team on the other side. And so I think you see that conflict, the fact that maybe the Iranians aren't themselves quite clear in what direction they want to go to. They also are just a fractured country. So you have the leadership of the country, there's the supreme leader, and then there are a lot of officials below the supreme leader that has some influence in the negotiation. It's not sometimes totally clear what the negotiating position of the team is. And I don't know if that's sometimes bad communication, if that's bad faith. I wouldn't pretend to venture a guess there, but I will say with confidence, it's sometimes hard to figure out exactly what it is that the Iranians want to accomplish out of the negotiation. So what we've done is tried to be as clear as possible. What are our red lines? What are the things that we're willing to be accommodating on, and what are the things that we absolutely must have? And as the president has said ad nauseum, and I think I've said it a lot too, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. We want to see not just the commitment to not have a nuclear weapon, but the commitment to work with us on a process to ensure that not just now, not just when Donald Trump is president, but years down the road that the Iranians are not rebuilding that nuclear capability. And that's what we're trying to accomplish in the negotiation. Sorry, you had a follow-up.
Yeah, just for Americans at home, because this has been going on for several weeks now. I think what people just want to know is, do you personally believe that the Iranians will come to a deal? Because we keep seeing this over and over again where they go back and forth.
So do I personally believe it? The honest answer is, how could I possibly know, right? And you negotiate with people, and sometimes you feel like you're making progress, and sometimes you feel like you're not making progress. What I think is that the Iranians want to make a deal. What I think is that the Iranians recognize that a nuclear weapon is the red line for the United States of America, that they've internalized that, but we're not going to know until we're actually putting pen to paper on signing a deal. We've had a lot of drafts, a lot of pieces of paper going back and forth, but I will not say with confidence that we're going to reach a deal until we're actually signing a negotiated settlement here. And I think that it's ultimately up to the Iranians whether they're willing to meet us, because I think we're certainly doing a good job, and we're certainly negotiating in good faith. We're going to have to see what ultimately happens with them. I can't say with confidence because I don't know what's in the mind of the other side. John?
Mr. Vice President, thank you. I want to ask you about that $1.8 billion fund set up, weaponization fund as it's being called. Why should taxpayers be paying to settle a $10 billion lawsuit that was brought by the President of the United States? And should people that attacked the Capitol building and assaulted police officers, should they be eligible? Should they receive money? Should they receive money from this fund?
Well, let me say a couple things about that. First, John, I think in some ways the media has misrepresented what this is actually about. This is about compensating Americans for the lawfare that we saw under the last administration. And by the way, anybody can apply for it. Republicans can apply for it. Democrats can apply for it. As you know, the President of the United States has pardoned a number of Democrats who he felt were actually subject to this lawfare. I mean, if Hunter Biden wants to apply for this particular fund, he is welcome to. It's going to go through a normal process where we vet everything, where we try to identify whether people's claims are actually legitimate. But here's the question. When you say, why should taxpayers fund this? Whenever the United States government incurs legal expenses, it pays out those legal expenses. When it's settling a lawsuit, it pays out money to settle that lawsuit. And the question is a dollar of this money going to the Trump administration? No. Is a dollar of this money going to Donald Trump personally? No. Is a dollar of this money going to Donald Trump's family? No. The people that would get the money are people, some of whom have been prosecuted completely disproportionate to any crime they've ever committed. Like, let's just take a couple of examples. Tina Peters is this woman who is about to get out of prison, thanks in large part to the president's good work in Colorado. This is a woman who, at worst, if you believe everything that the prosecutors said about her, committed misdemeanor trespassing, and somebody threw the book at her. This innocent grandmother was going to spend 10 years in prison, completely disproportionate to any misdemeanor trespassing that I've ever seen. Was that fair? No. Is it reasonable for her to get some compensation for the fact that she was treated unfairly? I think the answer is yes, and I think that what we're going to see, hopefully, is the entire country, led by this Department of Justice, turning the page on the lawfare. What I would like to propose, and I think the Democrats, hopefully they're willing to meet us halfway here. I won't hold my breath. But what I would propose is something very simple, that if you are willing to turn the page on Joe Biden's lawfare, why don't we prosecute people? Very simple principle. Why don't we prosecute people who violate the law? Let's not prosecute people because they said the wrong thing or because they had the wrong political candidate or because they had the wrong viewpoint. And I think part of that, part of turning the page on that, is to actually ensure the real victims of that lawfare receive some compensation. That's what this fund is going to be targeted at. And again, there's going to be a process to ensure that that money is only given to people who have actually, I hate to say earned it, but the people who actually were really mistreated by the previous administration and Department of Justice.
Go ahead. I understand that everybody is eligible to apply for this fund. I mean, you're eligible, but I assume you're not going to apply and you don't think you should get money out of this fund.
Of course.
So isn't it just as easy to say that people that attacked police officers should not get taxpayer money from this fund?
Well, look, John, we're not trying to give money to anybody who attacked a police officer. We're trying to give money, not give money, we're trying to compensate people where the book was thrown at them, they were mistreated by the legal system. Sometimes, you know, we do have, John, in this country, innocent until proven guilty. We do have people who were accused of attacking law enforcement officers. That doesn't mean that we're going to completely ignore some of the claims that they're going to make. We're going to evaluate these things on a case-by-case basis. And if we think that somebody, whatever they were accused of, if we think that somebody was unfairly prosecuted and deserves just compensation, then that's what this fund is going to exist to provide. It's just going to correct a wrong, and I think that's a good thing. And I'd encourage everybody, Democrat, Republican, Independent, let's turn the page on this thing that we did under the last administration where we tried to throw people in prison because they had the wrong politics. Let's throw people in prison who broke the law. I think this fund is a good part of getting justice for the people who were wrongly treated. Back there, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Just to follow up on that quickly, does that mean that people that were violent, that were convicted, were mistreated? Are you saying that?
Well, you're asking me to comment on hypotheticals and on any number of dozens of cases. Here's the thing. We're going to look at everything case by case. As you know, every single case has its own details. Every single case has, you know, there are things about it that maybe don't meet the eye. We're just going to look at every case by case. That's all I'm saying. I'm not committing to giving anybody money or committing to giving no one money. What I'm committing to is a legal process to review these claims and to make sure that people who are mistreated by their government get a little bit of compensation because of it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Yes, sir. I realize that the pointer finger is not as precise as I thought it was. The guy in, sorry, I have this cheat sheet, but the problem with being 41 years old is I'm blinder than I was a few years ago. So we'll say blue blazer, blue tie. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I'd like to ask a quick follow-up on Iran, but first I'd like to ask you about fentanyl. Fentanyl sourced largely from China killed about 403,000 Americans over the past 7 years, according to CDC data. That's one in every 850 Americans who died. White House Counterterrorism Director Sebastian Gorka said last week that China's exports amounted to the targeted killing of Americans and war by other means. Do you agree with that assessment? And what is the Trump administration doing to punish and deter China, especially since the Supreme Court struck down the fentanyl tariffs?
So go ahead and ask the second question, because I'll try to take each question and then I'll try to answer them and then we'll go on. And if you ask two questions, I can only guarantee that I'll answer one. In fact, I'm a politician. Maybe I won't even answer the one that you asked. But I will try at least to answer one question.
Okay, well, I'd love to hear the fentanyl response too, if not today sometime.
Go ahead.
On Iran, is Russia taking possession of the enriched uranium in Iran a plausible end to the war? And if not, why not?
So first, on the Russia taking possession of the enriched uranium, look, these things are being discussed through negotiation. That is not currently our plan. That has never been our plan. I've seen some reporting on that. I don't know where it comes from, but the president's going to continue to negotiate a deal. So that is not currently the plan of the United States government. The Iranians have not raised it. My sense is that's not something the Iranians would be particularly excited about, and I know the president isn't particularly excited about it either, but who knows? I'm not going to make pre-commitments in a negotiation on any particular topic. On the question of fentanyl, a lot of people have died from fentanyl, absolutely. A lot of it has come from mainland China. We're certainly aware of that. But here's what I'll say. First of all, we've made incredible strides under Donald Trump's leadership to cut down on fentanyl deaths. If you look at the number of people who died in 2026, it's going to be lower than the number who died in 2025, which is way lower than the number who died in 2024. This is one of the things that I think all Americans, we should be celebrating, and I'm certainly proud of the president's leadership for making this possible. We ran, if you remember, in November of 2024 on a very simple idea that a lot of fentanyl came from East Asia, it was smuggled into Central and South America, and then the cartels would bring it into our country, and a lot of our people would get poisoned and killed because of it. We said if you got control of the southern border, we would see a substantial reduction in the number of people who died from fentanyl overdoses in the United States of America, and that is exactly what's happened. Now, yes, the president has raised this with President Xi any number of times. I know it came up during the meeting that they had in China just last week, but it's come up in any number of phone calls, and our sense is that President Xi has been willing to work with us on this, and obviously we want to continue to ensure that the Chinese work with us as much as possible because we don't want our people to be poisoned. So we'll keep working on that issue with the Chinese. There's been, I think, a big amount of progress that's been made, but of course we can make a lot more progress, and we're certainly going to be committed to doing exactly that. Right. Yeah. White jacket, sorry.
Oh, hey, yeah, Natalie with the Washington
Natalie,
Post.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Does the government need to create a new mandatory review process for new AI models, given the concerns about Mythos? And secondly, in a few days, Pope Leo.
All right, back here in the Live Impact News studio where we are actually going to take a brief commercial break here. We come out of the White House press briefing because we have a special guest with us here in studio right now. I won't reveal his identity, though I will mention that every single week he drops by 13 News Now to give us financial advice, to give us a financial forecast, so that might be a clue if you're a regular viewer. Now, we still have the White House press briefing happening as we speak. We are recording on that in case we have time to go back to it, and of course the NTSB investigation ongoing into that UPS plane crash in Louisville in late 2025. But we are going to take a commercial break here, and when we get back, a financial forecast coming your way. We will be right back. Okay, back here in the Live Impact News studio, and I ruined the surprise. I meant to come out on a one-shot with just me, but there you see, Tim Fitzwilliams is here. He's with us. He's ready for another one of our weekly financial forecasts here. And, first of all, Tim, let's just start. We get to hang out with you all the time now. We don't want to take it for granted. We want to make sure we're checking in with our friend. So how are you? How's everything going with you the last few weeks?
Things are good. Can't complain. Things are going well, right? Got a few trips I'm trying to plan for the summer. As most people, right, are trying to figure out their vacation.
Now, trips planned for the summer. You got to give us a little bit more information here. What do we got?
So we've got a trip to Banff. One of the companies is having a big event out there, so we're going to go out to Banff in Canada. So that'll be unique. It's like a big ski resort, but it's during the summer, right? But it can still be fun. So we're going to check that out. Then we're going to take the company out for their company vacation. We're going to do a cruise. Leaving right out of here, actually. So we do that for the company and employees just to kick back, relax. One of the perks of working with us.
Okay. Cruising out of Norfolk.
Yes, sir.
Very nice. I love whenever I drive by there and there's sort of a little bit of a hubbub. That there's a cruise that's arrived or about to take off or on its little halftime stop. So, all right. Well, I'm excited for you guys. I'm excited for the company. And, you and I have talked about this before, is that it's good to make sure that you have room for rest, relaxation, and recuperation at the same time. You want to make sure that it fits within your budget. That's something you and I have talked about. We have a couple topics, one in particular we want to dive into today, but since we're talking vacation here, you've given us that advice of maybe a staycation or maybe different things you can do to try to make sure that your vacation works for your budget. I'm wondering if people are looking at this summer and they're saying, well, this is going to be a little tough here this summer. I don't know where gas prices are headed. We've got a geopolitical situation that I can't get a handle on. I'm going to start planning for a vacation next summer now. Any advice that you have for them on how to make sure they can maximize a year from now their vacation?
Well, sure. I think it all starts with actually having a budget, not just in your head, but actually a written budget. Like, write that down. There's software that you can use that's out there now that's free. There's a lot of software available to financial planners. So if you're working with someone, they should have some type of planning software. But it's important to have that stuff written down. And then from there, you can make your true analysis. You're not just guessing, right? Because a lot of people, I notice, even myself, people seem to see a number in the bank account and they make decisions off the last number they can remember. Well, that number changes, right? It's constantly moving. So you don't want to just think, oh, I got this paycheck in, and so that's my number. That's what I have left over. It might have been a different month. You don't know, right? You could have had an emergency, or you could have had more fun. You could have had different events. Who knows? So it's important to kind of write it down so you can kind of get a feel for what you really do have left over. So you're not guessing. You can see the numbers and you can plan accordingly.
So if someone is trying to plan accordingly, we know that we've got lots of great advice on how they can do that, but getting and using a financial advisor, always helpful for trying to make these things work. But I think maybe there's a lot of people who are saying, I would love to do that. I don't know what to look for. I don't know how much I should be paying, what type of values I should be looking for, and where I should be looking, right? So I guess let's start there. Is around what ballpark should someone be paying someone to help them manage their money?
Right, so that's a great question, right? And so the way I look at it is what are you getting for a value, right? So the fee becomes subjective to the value that you're receiving. If you are paying a fee and you're not getting a value, well, then that's eroding your returns. But what if you are paying a fee and you're getting a value, and net of fees you're doing well? Well, then that's increasing your returns. So it's about whether or not you're getting an actual value from the fee that you're paying. And that's where the argument comes in on, is it worth it to pay someone or is it not? And the answer is it depends. It depends on what you value and whether or not if you're getting that from the person that you're paying or that you're looking to pay.
And sometimes, I hope that you don't have to start to sort of go through the process and be in the process and then all of a sudden realize, well, I'm not getting the value out of these fees that I want. Do you have any advice for people who want to make sure they don't get halfway down the road and then realize they're driving on the wrong side? I mean, is there anything people should be looking for both within their own research and...
Yeah. So I think when you decide that you want to have an advisor as a fee, what you're really saying in simple terms is you believe there's someone out there better than you. So if you actually can believe in that, because there's two schools of thoughts from an academic standpoint, you either feel like you can do it all on your own, just sit back, relax, and not worry about it, or you believe that there's things in this world that can cause volatility in your portfolio and there's someone better suited to handle that. So if you believe that there's someone better suited to handle the volatility, then that's when you're going to go look to try to find an advisor. You're going to look for someone that can help you. One of the things you can do if you're worried about getting in and having a relationship and then it blowing up, but you're already been in it for 6 months or whatever, right? And you're not comfortable, so you don't want to even try in the first place, is really understand what does it look like in their review schedule. So to answer your question, how often are they reviewing? And then to go deeper with that, Connor, is what are they doing on a regular, consistent basis? How often are they rebalancing to make sure that your risk tolerance is staying intact? Is that quarterly? Is it monthly? Right? For us, we like to do that weekly. So there's different valuations put on that. We believe that the more that you manage of someone's portfolio, the more tactical and on top of it you need to be, which means you need to look at it frequently, right? So our personal belief is we need to look at it weekly. Not everyone believes that, but we believe that speed of being able to trade or get in and out of position has value. And so if you're looking at an advisor, you want to find out how often are they looking at your portfolio and how often are they going to make a change if something happens. In simple terms, if something happens today, is your firm that you're working with prepared and ready to deal with what happens today? And a lot of times, and we do not like this answer, and it's not necessarily wrong, it's a mindset, right? So from a mindset standpoint, we do not like this answer, but a lot of times people will say, well, I'm not worried about it. I'm just going to revisit it next quarter. We'll take a look at it at the end of the quarter, and then if there's something that needs to change, we'll do it then.
And that is not what you want. You do not want to, you want to be constantly checking, constantly looking, not delaying that look.
Well, that's how we believe.
Right.
And so it's not to say that that concept is wrong. When you run this business, you decide how you want to run it. Some people believe that the quarterly model is their model. We believe, and we have data to support this, that if you can lose less, you can make more. To lose less, you have to have less volatility. To have less volatility, you got to be more active. So the strategy is called active and tactical portfolio management, which means you're always looking at things. And that's what we believe will put you ahead. Not that you're trying to beat the market. See, I think, Connor, a lot of people are thinking, well, if I pay an advisor, I need to beat the market. And it's not always about beating the market from how most people think, like average return. This gets into a more complex conversation. There's some math out there. The sequence of return talks about how volatility will affect the end number. In other words, a husband and wife can have an account that has an average rate of return of, say, 8% over 30 years. They can both have their own account, invested differently, but have the same average return over 30 years. Well, what's really unique is that at the end of that term, the wife could have double the amount of the husband, and it depends on the volatility in the sequence of numbers that they have. So it's really important that we're looking at things on a tactical and active basis, which means consistently, if you want to try to stop or hedge against some of that volatility. And a lot of folks don't think that's what it's about. They say, you know what, if I'm paying a fee, then I need you to do better than the S&P 500. What you have to stop and think about is no one beats the S&P 500.
Mm-hmm.
Right? No one beats that. It just doesn't happen. Right? I think one man's been recorded as doing it, and when asked if he could do it again, he laughed and said, no way. So then, well, how do you win? Is this all just a big farce? Is it all a big scam? I mean, that's really a tough pill to swallow, right? When you're federally regulated and all of that stuff that you have to do to be a fiduciary. So it's like, well, there has to be some value to it, so what is it? Well, the key is to lose less for your clients. You look at these big firms like the Goldman Sachs of the world and whatnot, and they're charging these high-end fees. Why would all these people that are super rich go to these firms? They're not getting ripped off, right? They're going there because they can see a value. Well, what's that value? Not to beat the market, but rather to lose less in times of volatility so they have a greater internal return.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you should be seeing from an advisor. If you're trying to bring someone on board, you want to make sure that they're managing in such a way that's going to get you a better internal return.
That's the value you're looking for. That is the search right there. Now, you've touched on something that I actually want to follow up on and continue with. But here's what we have. You and I talked about this a bit before. We have a very busy day here in Hampton Roads. I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sticking around for a couple minutes. We're going to bring you back on a little later in the 2 o'clock hour, not too long from now. I know everybody wants to keep hanging with Tim. What we're going to do is we're going to take a commercial break. We are going to hear from Sarah Calloway, who is in Newport News right now. After we hear from Sarah Calloway, who is on a time crunch because she wants to get back into court to cover the rest of the trial, then we'll bring Tim back on because I have a couple more questions about some of the things that we talked about here, especially your personal experience and some things that people should be looking for as they make these decisions. So we're going to go to commercial break. We're going to come back. We're going to do live coverage of the Richneck criminal trial. Then we're going to bring Tim Fitzwilliams back on, and we're going to kind of have a sequel to today's financial forecast. All right, we will be right back. For now, we'll be right back after this commercial break. Okay, we are back here on Live Impact News in the studio. We are going to have Tim Fitzwilliams back on with us in just a moment. But we actually, for now, are going to give a call to Sarah Calloway. Sarah Calloway is out covering this trial in Newport News. She has been field producing. She has been field reporting. and she has been all over what is happening in Newport news. So we are actually going to go ahead and bring her on right now. We're going to give her a call here live on air, and she is going to give us some updates in this case. So bear with us. We are going to give Sarah Calloway a call, and we're going to have some updates coming your way. And we are back. We have Sarah Calloway on the phone with us right now. Now, if you're a regular viewer of Live Impact News, you may recognize the name Sarah Calloway. Typically, she is super producer Sarah Calloway, who produces our morning stream. But this week, she is both reporting and producing from the field at the Richneck Elementary trial. First of all, Sarah, one, thank you for taking a little time to join us. We know you have to get back up to that courtroom soon. But number two, can you just give us, before we dig into specifics, a sense of how opening statements went? What stood out to you about opening statements from both the prosecution and defense this morning?
So it's been a very busy day for day 2 of this trial. We started before the jury was even seated this morning. The defense brought a couple of motions to the judge's attention. After addressing those, the jury was seated. We heard prosecution opening statements, defense opening statements, and then from there we've heard from several witnesses. So far we've heard from the teacher who was shot that day, Abby Zwerner. That was followed by Amy Kovac, who was another teacher at Richneck Elementary School. We've also heard from Deputy Thomas Blythe, who responded to the shooting at Richneck that day. And then we've also heard from Brianna Foster Newton, who was the former principal of Richneck Elementary School. So there's a lot to talk about. I will start with the prosecution opening statements. So to start, prosecution said that Parker was aware of the child's long list of disciplinary issues and that she was the one with authority to prevent what happened that day. He also said that even though Abby Zwerner was the person who was shot on the day of the shooting, he said that this specific case is not about Zwerner. He said it is about, quote, the children who lived through this event. He said that there were 19 children in Zwerner's classroom at the time of the shooting. After that, the prosecution laid out a timeline of events on the day of the shooting, including each time Zwerner and other teachers warned Dr. Parker about the child's behavior and concerns over whether the child had a gun. The prosecution says during at least one of those times, Parker did not say anything and just gave the teacher a blank stare. And then the prosecution went on to say, quote, the crisis in this case did not begin with the firing of a gun. From there, the prosecution said that the Richneck Crisis Management Plan requires teachers to report concerns and for administrators to take action, and that only administrators and school security officers are able to search students. The school security officer for Richneck was also shared with another school in the district, and that officer was at the other school on the day of the shooting. So the prosecution said that because of this, the only 2 people in the building with the authority to search the student that day would have been Dr. Parker and then the principal, Brianna Foster Newton. So from there, the prosecution said that Newton couldn't have done the search because she did not know that there were any concerns about the child to begin with, because the prosecution says Parker had not reported any of those concerns to the principal. The prosecution ended by saying that the teachers would have been violating school policy had they searched the boy themselves. And later in the testimony, we did hear from Amy Kovac, who she clarified that teachers can search bags, they cannot search actual students. So then the defense went on after that. They kept it a lot shorter. They said that the claim that Parker was the only one with the authority to act that day is untrue. The defense said that Zwerner and other teachers who expressed concerns should have acted themselves by first separating the child from the other students. The defense said that they should have done that because they were the ones there from the beginning to the end, and they were the ones with the direct contact with the child. So that was just a summary of the prosecution opening statements and the defense opening statements.
Okay, so a lot of back and forth there, and a lot of talk over the sort of technicalities that go into a warning of a potential threat of a weapon, and then who can search what when, and what is the responsibility to search what when between administrators? I mean, it sounds like that is playing a major role in this trial, just how those sort of rule sets and responsibilities break down. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and the prosecution, they were focused mainly, they were saying that, these teachers did follow school policy. They were following the Richneck Crisis Management Plan. The defense, on the other hand, they said even if they were following policy, there were other things that they could have done, and like separating the child from the other students, and still have been. That's the defense argument. They said that Parker wasn't the only one with the authority to act in this case.
And that as well, something that we heard quite a bit of questioning about is did you allow them to go out to recess knowing that there may have been a threat? Things of that nature have really been prevalent in this trial. Now, I want to move forward from these opening statements because something we have not heard much about yet is the discussion of body cam footage within this trial. What can you tell us about that aspect that we really have not heard anything about thus far this morning?
Yes, so after the opening statements, we've heard from several witnesses, including Abby Zwerner. After Zwerner took the stand, we heard from Amy Kovac, who she was a reading specialist at Richneck at the time of the shooting. So during her testimony, she just outlined how many times she had reported her concerns about the child in question to Dr. Parker, and then also what happened in the aftermath of the shooting. So the body camera footage is from law enforcement body camera, and we did not show it on air because it shows the child, and also there is lots of profanity in it, so we did not show it on air. But from what we saw on camera, it shows Amy Kovac, the boy, and deputies in a classroom after the shooting, talking with deputies. In the video, the boy is using lots of profanity, and then when referencing the gun, he said, quote, "I stole that from my mom."
Wow, okay. And that does explain why we haven't gotten updates on this yet. We are making sure as to not show any of the children. We're not naming any of the children. We also are not showing any jurors in the room. So that does make a lot more sense as to why we haven't gotten these updates. Is there more? I mean, that sounds like shocking video to witness. What other role has that played in this trial so far?
They played, that's so far the only body camera video that we have seen so far. And it was pretty quick. After that, so that was, the prosecution brought that in. After that, the defense took over with their questioning of Kovac, and they went back and forth several times about whether Kovac thought the gun could have been a toy. So that was most of what we heard from Amy Kovac.
And what was the result of that discussion as to whether or not the gun was a toy? Was there a clear conclusion to that line of questioning?
There was a lot of back and forth about this specifically, and she did ultimately say that it was possible that it could have been a toy. And she referenced another body camera video that we did not see, but she referenced that body camera video, saying that she is seen or heard saying that on that specific body camera video, and she said at the time she was in shock.
Okay, now you mentioned she was in shock. I'm wondering, when it comes to Abby Zwerner, when it comes to Amy Kovac, people who were there that day who are now having to relive the events. Ebony Parker sitting in the courtroom reliving these events. Is there anything you can report back to us in terms of the emotional state of the witnesses, of the courtroom in general, and of the scene today?
So yesterday, when the trial was, before jury selection even began, the judge read all 8 counts to Dr. Parker that she was facing, all 8 child neglect charges. And during that process, for every single count, Dr. Parker had to enter a plea. And she was very, at that point, she was very emotional when entering each plea all 8 times. She visibly emotional there. Outside of that, it's been 3.5 years since the shooting happened. it's been very procedural. Otherwise, like with the other witnesses, it's been very procedural. The back and forth has gotten heated at times, including the point when we were talking about whether or not the Kovac thought the gun could have been a toy. But yeah, so far, seen some emotion from Dr. Parker at the very beginning of the trial when she was entering her not guilty pleas.
Okay, great to know. Is there anything else that you are able to report at this time? Anything else you want to include?
So we've just been hearing from witnesses now. The last witness we heard from was Brianna Foster Newton. She was released, and now they didn't say, court is about to begin again. They did not say who they were bringing up after the recess. So we will report back when we find out.
Okay, we know you've got a courtroom to get back up to. Super producer Sarah Calloway, now super reporter Sarah Calloway, adding some context and insight into what she and Madison Schlegel are seeing in Newport News. Sarah, we really appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again before too long.
All right, thank you, Connor.
All right, thanks, Sarah. All right, that once again is Sarah Calloway. You heard the sort of the phone call ending tone there, such as the nature of going live over the phone on air. But we are back here in the studio, just us here now, because we got some major updates there from Sarah Calloway, including the playing of that body camera video that we are not showing because we are not identifying any of the children involved in this case, but that clearly made an impact there in the courtroom. So we'll continue to get updates from both Madison Schlegel and Sarah Calloway as we move through. It is about to start back up, as you heard them say. Now, you may be wondering, okay, if court is starting back up, we'll be having our live camera back up here as well. If you recall, we are on a 30-minute delay. That, again, is to protect the sanctity of the trial, the identification of children, jurors, and everyone else who, needs to maintain a level of sort of protection and secrecy here as this trial goes forward. So we are on a 30-minute delay. If court is starting back up now, then we will likely be able to once again tune in live in about half an hour, but that's okay because we know that we've got more financial forecasts coming up live here in the studio. So we're going to take another commercial break, and then when we return, once again, we will speak with Tim Fitzwilliams. That is coming up next, so stay with us. All right, welcome back to Live Impact News here on 13 News Now Plus. We actually get to continue with a prior segment. We wanted to make sure that we got Sarah Calloway here live early enough where she would have a chance to get back up to the courtroom and continue her coverage of the Richneck Elementary criminal trial. So we took almost sort of a break in between our financial forecast. Tim Fitzwilliams is kind enough and patient enough to stay with us here on Live Impact News. So Tim, we're going to bring you back on here, and thanks for joining us once again. And let's continue with sort of some of what we were talking about. We were speaking about finding an advisor, what you should look for, how to know if you're getting the value that you want, and how to make those big decisions that are going to have an impact on your financial future. And, when we were off camera, you brought something up to me that I thought was interesting that maybe gets left out of these types of discussions, which is the responsibility that you guys have on your shoulders at all times, that financial advisors have on their shoulders at all times. I don't know that people necessarily realize that. So could you give us a little bit more insight into kind of that, the consequences that exist if you don't do everything that you're supposed to be doing from an organization and legal perspective?
Sure, absolutely. So when we look at choosing an advisor, one of the most important things in continuing that dialogue is, are they a fiduciary or not? And so what does that mean? It means that they have to put your interest ahead of their own interests. That's very, very important. Now, a lot of people think it just ends there. Like, if you don't do that, then you lose a client. People think it's that simple. And sure, that's part of it, but we're actually held to a higher standard. So at a state level and a federal level, if you do things that are not in the client's best interest, that are wrong and unethical, you can literally go to jail, and you can go to prison for the rest of your life, because the way that the law is written, it's per account. So at a federal level, it's like 5 years per account, and at a state level, it's 3 years. So it can be a major thing. So it's not something to just take lightly, that when someone's giving you advice, that they're just making it up, right? Or that they're just saying what they need to say to make a sale. On the flip side of that, not every person that is positioning a financial solution is a fiduciary. So you don't necessarily have to be a fiduciary, Connor, to be a stockbroker. You don't have to be a fiduciary to be in the insurance business, right? So you can be. So the simple answer is, are you a fiduciary, yes or no? And it should be just like that, quick answer. Are you a fiduciary? Yes, I am. And then move on. Now you've covered that model. Then from there, it's about the other things academically. How often are they looking at the portfolio? What type of models are they doing?
And when it comes to those other things and how they decide to run their business, how you decide to run your business, naturally it takes some time. You have a lot of experience in this field. What are some of the major things that you've learned, especially early on, that have kind of shaped you into the advisor that you are today?
Sure. So I am not giving any advice I don't follow myself. I believe there's someone always better than you out there. So how did we find that? What did we do to acquire that? Is we looked for the best of the best. And in the simplest way to do so, if you just looked at a Vanguard mutual fund and you read the prospectus, you would find that there's a fund manager, right, Connor? And that fund manager normally has a designation associated with that title, and that would be called a chartered financial analyst. So we decided that's who we need to manage the funds as well. So if Vanguard has it, we should have it for our company. That's how I kind of started understanding there's more to it than what you just read about or test on. So this chartered financial analyst, this designation, the Wall Street Journal says it's one of the hardest tests in the world to pass, Connor. So it's like first time through, I think it's like a 5% pass ratio for the first time through. So it's the highest level of intellectual capital you can have. But generally speaking, to have one work with you, you need around $10, $20 million to have them really even want to talk to you. And so one of our practices is we say, well, we realize that's the level of intellectual capital we want, but we decided we wanted to bring Wall Street to Main Street and offer that for anyone with $100,000. Not saying everyone has to have a CFA, but I'm saying when you do have someone that's at that level of market understanding, they can do fancy things. And fancy things can bring you more internal rate of return, can have less volatility. And I think that's important.
And I know that you're talking about rate of return when you say fancy things, but when you say fancy things, I think about that pocket square Very stylish, very nice. You've been coming with the pocket square recently. It is noticed and appreciated. Now, can I ask you a broader economy question here?
Sure.
Okay, so we have talked at length here, you and I, about not trying to beat the market, minimizing losses, and how you can't sort of chase that. That is not the financially responsible way to govern your money. And so we know that. And especially, I think it becomes more clear when we look at the market that we've been witnessing in the midst of this geopolitical conflict, the war in Iran, and we've seen what I kind of had described as a yo-yoing of this market.
That's right,
I mean, it
volatility.
is incredibly volatile. If you have people who are saying, look, I can't handle this. This is stressful. It goes up, it goes down. Sometimes it seems to go up or down based on a social media post or a headline in the morning, and then that changes by the time it's nightfall. This is just too much for me with the up and down erratic nature of this market. How do you judge that yo-yo market, and how do you approach clients who are maybe feeling stressed just about that volatility?
Sure. So we judge that in our firm. We judge that because we're taking that active and tactical role again. So when we make a purchase of a asset class or stock, for example, we also make a sell plan at the exact same time. So it's not emotional, Connor. It's not headlines. It's science driven. So we're doing research and analysis around what's going on, following the trends of the economy through the 6 stages, right? And where we feel like we're moving to. Then coupling that with our political understanding of what's going on in politics. How can that affect things? What else is going on? How are people feeling from a psychological standpoint with confidence and whatnot? So we look at all these different things in these scenarios, and that's how we make that decision. And so our team on the trade side of the house is utilizing the tools they have at their disposal, which I think is really important to kind of let you know that there's a whole nother world out there that most people can't engage in. Like in your 401, these tools, you just can't short stuff. You just can't inverse things. You just can't put leverage on things. I mean, there's ways, but it's not super simple, right? It's pretty plain vanilla. But when you're working with someone who's using a portfolio manager like a chartered financial analyst, it changes the dialogue completely. Now, we are shorting gold to protect our long-term holdings of gold, right? We are shorting bonds in 2022 to ensure that we can battle the rising interest rate. And even right now, right, we've done things to position ourselves, but not because of headlines, but because of the science and the economics behind it, and being able to move quickly through that. I think that's the most important thing, is being able to respond quickly, and that's hard to get. Most people are not going to look at the portfolio except for quarterly, as we talked before, and we just don't think that's good enough.
Very hard to get, no question about it. I like how you tied that back to some of the topics we were discussing earlier. Last question for you. I think most regular Americans, they see high inflation and their immediate thought is, I'm going to be paying a lot more for groceries. I'm going to be paying a lot more for everyday goods and services, which is obviously a massive portion of this. I'm wondering if when it comes to a high inflation environment, are there other aspects that you would look at as a financial expert that maybe we don't see that are worth keeping an eye on? I hope that question makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. So when we look at the inflation environment that we're in, or any time you have an economic outlier, you have to ask yourself, what is that outlier? Why are we in the inflation environment? Well, because of the cost of gas and oil, right? Which then goes back to the conflict that we're having in Iran. So what you really have to identify is, how long do you think that's going to last? And at some point, it does become like a cliff, if you will. It's where you could lead into a true global energy crisis. But when you start talking about crisis and global effects, all of a sudden you notice people start to get involved. In fact, just this morning, from my understanding, and I haven't fact-checked it, Connor, so you're the guy that could tell me, but from my understanding, Trump had plans to really attack Iran tomorrow. But a bunch of other folks that were their neighbors said, hold on, and we're going to talk about this. Because at some level, when you get into crisis in the next level of attack, the next level of a problem for the economy, it's going to affect everyone. So people don't want that to happen. So as you see, you're getting into this energy crisis walkway, if you will, which is what we're in. We're in that walkway. We're walking down the plank. But like I've said last week with you, is where is the end of that plank? And we don't know that. But as you get closer, other people are going to get involved because nobody wants to go through that. So going back to your point about inflation, in the mindset that it's just a short to midterm issue with the conflict in Iran, then everything's going to go back to its normal model. It's just going to take longer and longer and longer to get back to normalcy as you have longer and longer time with the conflict. I hope that answers your question if you were asking about inflation and how it affects the market and what our thoughts are on it.
Yeah, and it's something we've seen, to your point, we have seen even a little bit, nearly a cycle of threats are made, and then you get the update that now negotiations are in progress. It's another one of those factors that kind of plays into that yo-yoing that we have seen. So, well, Tim, we appreciate you not just stopping by for a little bit, but for a lot of it today on Live Impact News.
Absolutely.
For multiple segments with us here. We got to dive a little bit into your sort of personal growth as an advisor, and then how people should be approaching this current economy, and if they're looking for their own advisor, how they should go through that process. So we appreciate everything. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's great. I look forward to talking to you some more.
Well, we're going to see Tim Fitzwilliams at 4:30 as we do every single Tuesday. But on the occasional Tuesday, we get to have him here in studio. So we appreciate it as always, Tim. And we'll see you in, 2 hours or so?
I think that's about right. Yep.
All right. 13 News Now, 4:30. You can get more from Tim Fitzwilliams. For now, we're going to take a commercial break here on Live Impact News. We will, however, be right back with more breaking live events for you when we return. All right, we're back here on Live Impact News where, we've got a number of things that we do want to cover here, and we still have 18 minutes in the stream. We are a little low here on time, but we have talked about the NTSB investigation into the plane crash that happened in Louisville with a UPS plane in November of 2025, one that was shocking in the footage of it, and then now we have an investigation into the reasons behind it from the National Transportation Safety Board. We've talked about it quite a bit. I think we'll listen in on that hearing for at least a brief moment. It does look like within that hearing it's been a lot of as we'll see here, we have a timeline up here. It's been a lot of sort of PowerPoint style timelines and breakdowns. So we're going to listen in and see how digestible it is. We'd like to gain more information as to how something like that could happen. We had a number of plane crashes in 2025 that have made headlines. So let's take a listen. We'll keep an eye on it, and we'll move forward if it is overly technical in any way. But for now, let's listen in to the NTSB hearing.
Have a final SRB decision. The report came in May 7th. And then after the report came in, we released a service letter to the fleet informing them of the issue. And that was followed by a fleet team digest also informing the fleet. And the subject of the service letter was inspections that would be used to reliably detect a migrated bearing. Our decision in June 2008, as we saw, was not safety. And then we continued to a final fleet team digest in May 2009 and issuing a service letter in 2011, which was a different spherical bearing, an upgraded bearing.
Okay, thanks. And one more question on this. Was the design and certification of the aft bulkhead ever reconsidered as a result of this cost?
We don't have information that would say yes or no. We don't know.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Jordanheim, if you could pull up Exhibit 7Q, page 24. Okay, this is one of the pages out of the partnership meeting minutes that from the meeting on February 12th of 2008. And we can see that one of the actions agreed upon between Boeing and the FAA is that Boeing would revise the inspection requirements in the MD-11 maintenance planning document for the 60-month inspection of the wing pylon aft bulkhead to include a detailed inspection of the spherical bearing. Can you explain why this was not done?
No, I cannot. It's a current status here. We were investigating whether an MPD change, an interval change would occur. In a later meeting, we discussed that an AMM change, the procedure change, would be executed. We have not been able to find a record that would explain the change from an interval to the procedure.
Okay, would there have been a certain department within Boeing that would be responsible for an MPD change?
There would have.
Okay. And would there have been a process for making that change? And if so, what was that process?
I'm sure there would have been a process, and I don't know it.
Okay. Thank you. Which department would that be for the MPD change?
I believe it's the maintenance engineering department.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Jordanheim, if you can pull up the timeline again. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So San Antonio Aerospace reported a right aft bulkhead spherical bearing aft swage ring separation on a UPS airplane to Boeing on July 1st, 2008. We know that COS 2008-0594 was initiated for this event. So how was the reported event in July 2008 analyzed and determined as a cost reportable item under the process in place at the time?
It would have been evaluated against the criteria for cost reportability, the 21.3 criteria that we've been discussing.
Okay, it appears as though they're talking past plane crashes, maybe even going so far back as nearly 2 decades. So we are actually going to move forward with some of our coverage elsewhere here, particularly because House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has started a news conference in Washington, D.C. So let's listen in on that right now and see what Hakeem Jeffries has to say. Now, as you can tell, it does appear as though we're having an audio issue with Hakeem Jeffries and his press conference that's happening right now. So we are not able to hear this press conference at this time. There is certainly a chance that this is user error, but we are working to see if we can maybe get some audio on this. Now, it is interesting because earlier today at a news conference that was held at the Ideas press conference, the Center for American Progress, Hakeem Jeffries was at that event as well and spoke on stage. Since we're unable to hear from his live press conference in Washington, D.C., perhaps it's a good time for us to go ahead and cue up his earlier press conference from on stage at the Ideas conference. So why don't we go ahead and listen in on that since we have that all queued up and ready to go. Here is Hakeem Jeffries, not the live version that we were hoping for, but a pre-recorded press conference from Hakeem Jeffries. Let's take a listen.
John, for your friendship and your leadership, and to Nira, so appreciate you, and to everyone here in the CAP family. It's great to be back. You know, I think our focus, and we're going to continue to relentlessly make this clear over the next few months in advance of taking back control of the House of Representatives. And then when we do, in the next Congress, we want to focus on cost, we want to focus on care, and we want to focus on combating corruption. But right at the top of that list is the economy, lowering the high cost of living, dealing with the fact that far too many everyday Americans are struggling to live paycheck to paycheck, can't thrive, and can barely survive. This in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, and it's unacceptable. And the American people have been crying out for this administration or this Congress to do something about lowering the high cost of living, and they failed. And, you know, we define those costs in a variety of different, you know, issue areas that we have to tackle. Housing, right? Gas, groceries, goods, and utilities. In terms of what needs to happen, you know, related to the impact that this environment is having on everyday Americans. Related to that, of course, is care and the cost of it, but also making sure that that care is provided in a high quality way. So clearly that's healthcare. We have a broken healthcare system that Republicans have decimated, unprecedented attack on the healthcare of the American people in all of the things. That's on Medicaid, of course, the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, the attacks on hospitals and nursing homes, community-based health clinics, the Affordable Care Act, vaccine availability, the National Institute of Health, the Centers for Disease Control, the FDA, all of the things, unprecedented attack on the health care of the American people. We got to fix our broken health care system and make sure that what we put in place is the best ever. And then, of course, related to that is child care on the front end and elder care on the back end. And then we certainly feel a responsibility to tackle like just the naked corruption that we're seeing, but also connected to the fact that because Republicans are focused on enriching themselves, their family members, and their big donors, they're not focused on solving the problems that the American people want us to solve on their behalf. But there's a related issue, excuse me, that we need to deal with, and that is dramatic reform to the fact that the system is rigged against everyday Americans to benefit, you know, the elites. And that's going to require massive campaign finance reform, massive electoral reform, and yes, massive Supreme Court reform as well.
I want to come back to the court, and I want, in particularly the Calais decision. But I noted your current circumstances, and you're having to live with in a house that really is just on bended knee to the president. But you've actually been successful in peeling off Republicans and passing by using discharge petitions the premium tax credit.
Okay, we are actually back here in the studio. We did not get to spend long at that particular event because it does look like things have gone live again at the courthouse in Newport News for the Richmond Elementary School shooting. So we are going to go back out to that for just a few minutes. A couple events that I've pulled up here just to give you a warning of what's to come. We won't have time to get to them, but up on the top of your screen, you see a Department of Justice press conference on antitrust case involving China and COVID-19. So we don't know where that will go, but we know that is the topic that will be discussed. Then on the bottom of your screen in San Diego, officials will give an update on the Islamic Center shooting that we saw happen yesterday in San Diego, California. So two things that we will not have time for, but that are upcoming, and this maybe gives us a look ahead to what's to come in the news in the rest of the afternoon and tomorrow, especially here on Live Impact News. For the time being, though, we are going to head back out to Newport News for the Richmond Elementary School criminal trial that continues right now. Now, we have brought this up here, and this will happen from time to time, is that the camera has shifted over to the side. Now, that could indicate that there is something happening on sort of the main area of the courtroom that that cannot be recorded. So that's something that we are obviously very sensitive to, that we've talked about quite a bit here on Live Impact News today. So let's take a listen, see if we can hear anything going on, but for the time being, it looks like it may not be time to go back just yet. As we may have sort of suspected here once we saw where the camera was pointed, you don't hear any proceedings happening just yet, though it does appear as though, okay, we do have what appears to be a witness entering the courtroom now. So that was just fixed on the door so that we could see when the witness came in, and we'll go ahead and take this live once again.
Watch it stepping up.
Good afternoon. Would you please tell us your name?
I'm sorry.
Could you please tell us your name?
LaWanda Sample Rusk.
Thank you, Ms. Sample Rusk. We have a court reporter taking everything down today. Would you mind spelling your last name for us?
SAMPLE-8RUSK.
Thank you. I want to remind you that during your testimony today, we're not saying the names of any children, only using initials if we need to refer to them, including your own grandchildren or children. We'll only use initials or refer to them as your grandchildren, if anything, okay? Let me ask you, Ms. Sample Rusk, on January 6th of 2023, did you go to Richneck Elementary?
Yes, I did.
And what was the reason that you went there?
I went to Richneck to pick up one of my grandsons.
Okay.
Who was a first grader there.
And you have how many grandsons that attended Richneck at the time?
2.
Okay. And when you got to Richneck, did you go into the office area?
Yes, I did.
And if you remember, who was in there when you first arrived?
When I entered the office, it was the 2 receptionist secretaries. And there was a student sitting to the right when I got in the office.
Okay. Do you know the names of either of the secretaries?
I believe one was a substitute there because the other was on vacation. I'm not sure, but the other one was there all the time, and she goes by Miss O.
Miss O.
No, yes.
Okay.
I think it's Olive. I don't know what that is. Olive.
That's okay. Thank you.
But we always call her Miss O because that's what my boys call her.
Okay. Now, while you were there in the office, did something happen that took you by surprise?
Yes.
Can you just tell?
Okay, not much time for us here in the courtroom as our show has come to an end. I greatly appreciate everyone bearing with me today as we did a couple things different here, but we hope to see everyone back tomorrow. We'll be back to normal. We'll be continuing to cover this trial. Madison Schlegel and Sarah Calloway doing a tremendous job with coverage of this trial. More to come this week. Appreciate everyone joining us today on Live Impact News.